Hello, my name's Aviva, and today I'm going to break down for you all of the lingo that book bloggers often use. So recently I've been getting a lot of DMs and comments about what all of these bookish terms and acronyms mean, like what's HEA, what's MC, what's DNF. And I realized that even though it's very normal for me to use these terms, not everybody is familiar with them. And then I remembered that I at one point wasn't familiar with them also, and I just slowly picked it all up over time. So I made a list for you guys of everything that I could think of, and I'm going to quickly break down for you what all of the terms and lingos and everything that you might come across when you're listening to other book bloggers or you're on Bookstagram and you see, descriptions and things like that. And hopefully this will be very helpful for some of you people who are new to the bookish community. I also wanted to point out though that this is only the stuff that I personally was able to think of. So if you have a question of something that you see often that I didn't mention in this video, feel free to leave a comment down below and I will answer it for you. I probably just didn't think of it. But anyway, before we get started, give this video a like. Also subscribe to my channel if you're not already subscribed. And anyway, let's just jump in. So first up, I have DNF, which is did not finish. All it means is that I didn't finish a book, or somebody decided to put a book down before they got to the end. It's usually because people weren't vibing with it, weren't liking it, something just wasn't clicking. Next, I have TBR, which means to be read. Usually when I'm talking about TBRs, it's referencing my physical TBR, which means it's all of the books that I physically own that I have not read yet. There's also want to read lists and then wish list. And the difference between TBRs, want to read lists, and wish lists, at least for me, is that a TBR is everything that I currently own, like my monthly TBRs. I make them at the beginning of every month, and it's all the books that I currently own that I want to get to that month, sort of vibes. And then my want to read list is all of the books that are somewhat on my radar. I have like 250 books on my want to read list. All it is that I save these books on Goodreads on this list, and it's books that I've heard people talk about or I've seen something and I'm somewhat interested in it. But then I also have a wish list, which is my Amazon wish list, which means that it's all the books on my want to read list that I very much want to get soon. So I don't have 250 books on my Amazon wish list. I have maybe 50. HEA means happily ever after. It's referencing the end of a book. All it means is that at the end of the book, you are going to have a good ending. It's not going to be like everybody dies at the end sort of vibes, ARCs, or ARC, is advanced readers copies. This is usually what book bloggers get before a book is actually published. Publishers will usually send it to them early on so that they have time to review it and start talking about it to get it all hyped up. And this helps publishers and authors with marketing. MC is main character or motorcycle club. It just depends on what context it's being used in. Either it's referencing the main character of a book, or it's referencing that this book is an MC romance. It's a romance that revolves around a motorcycle club. And then very similarly to that, you have FMC or MMC, which is female main character or male main character. POV is point of view. So this is usually used when people are saying like what POV a book is being told in. Sometimes it's dual POV, where you're seeing the main girl and the main man's point of view, or it's like multiple VOV, like usually in a fantasy series when you're following multiple characters, you have a multiple POV book. YA and NA is referencing the age group that a book was made for. So YA is young adult, and that is geared towards high schoolers. And then NA is geared towards college-aged people. It's usually that the main character in the book is that age. Like in a YA book, you'll usually be following people in high school. Versus NA, most of the characters are probably going to be college-aged people, and therefore it's just geared towards the older crowd. Next, I have a couple of terms that are referencing relationships, usually in romance books. First up, I have poly or polyamorous, which is that one person has multiple relationships. So it's like one girl has like two boyfriends, or one boyfriend has like two girlfriends, something like that. I also have harem, which means that there is one guy that has multiple girls, usually 3 or more. Then there's also reverse harem, also known as RH, which means that there is one girl with multiple guys. Again, at least more than 3 guys is usually what an RH, reverse harem, is. Then I also have MFM, which means a male-female-male relationship. Usually this is referencing like a polyamorous relationship, like what is the dynamics with it. And then oppositely of that, I have MMF, which is male-male-female. It just means that there are 2 males and 1 female in a relationship. I feel like I did not explain that very well. I meant that male, female, male is when two males are straight and they're all about the actual female. But then a male, male, female relationship is that the two males are bisexual and then, there's a female that comes into the mix. So it's really complicated and there's so many dynamics you could go. You could go female, 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 or you could go male, male, male. Like there's like 1,000 different combinations you could do, but it basically is just like sometimes they're all about the female, sometimes they're all about all of them. It's just like, it's a dynamic thing and you can Google this further if you're like super interested in it. Then there's love triangles, which is when a main character is having a hard time choosing between two romantic partners. And then while we're on the topic of romance, there's also steamy/smut, which you'll hear so many people talking about in reference to romance books. That just means how like steamy a book is, how explicit it is in the way of like sexual content. Like sometimes books will be fade to black, which is another thing I wanted to mention. Fade to blacks means that there is no on-screen explicit content. Like they might like mention that they're having sex, but you won't see anything descriptive. That's a fade to black. Like maybe they'll start kissing and then all of a sudden the next scene will be that they're done doing whatever they were doing, but you kind of got the feeling that they were having sex. They just had it off screen, which means that it was fade to blacks. But steamy and smut just means that like how descriptive was something, like how steamy was it? Was it very explicit and it was very descriptive, or was it like pretty tame, Then there's INSTA-LOVE, which is when a couple meets and instantly falls in love with each other. I personally hate this when I find it in a book. Like it usually ruins the book for me. I'm really into like when a relationship is built up, like there's a lot of angst and tension and they get to know each other sort of vibes. But sometimes at the beginning of the book, the couple will meet and then already they're in love with each other. And then, the story's going to go from there. So that is what INSTA-LOVE means. And then similarly to that, there's also INSTA-LUST, which means that a couple will see each other and they're already automatically attracted to one another, but then they're going to have to start to get to know each other more before they actually fall in love. I'm not the biggest fan of INSTA-LUST, but it doesn't bother me as much as INSTA-LOVE. Sometimes, you see a person and you're automatically attracted to them, but you still have to get to know them before anything can happen. So this one is kind of like up in the air for me, but I still wanted to explain it to you in case you weren't familiar with it. And I just realized that some people might not even realize what angst, tension, and buildup means. All that means is like how the relationship was built up. So like, a good buildup is when it's somewhat of a slow burn, like all of a sudden they meet and then they have a couple of interactions and then that moves into something more. And then maybe they'll start to text and then maybe they'll see each other in person and go on a date. Like that is a buildup of a story. And then tension is kind of when like you feel it in the ear, like, they're looking at each other or like their fingers touch or like something that just builds up tension in a book. It's kind of hard to explain. You just like know it when you see it. And then angst is different than tension. And I don't even know how to explain this, but like I didn't think about this before. I just like to realize right now that you guys might not even realize what that was and I just said it. So like angst is just like, I don't know, it's tension but different. And I can't explain it, but it's really just referencing like when a relationship is being built up in a book, Next I have book boyfriends or book girlfriends, which is just referencing how you are so in love with a fictional character that you would very much like them to be your real life love person. So like I'll often say like, oh my God, I wish he was my book boyfriend because I loved him so much in a book. Like he was such a good boyfriend in that book that I want him for myself. There's also ship, which comes from the word relationship. All it means is when you're kind of rooting for these two people to get together. You'll often see this in a series instead of just like a single book when you're following multiple characters and you're seeing side stories and things like that. And all of a sudden you see something happening between two people and you're like, oh my God, I ship them. I hope that they get together, There's also this word that I use often called binge reading, which just means that you are going to binge the entire series, or you're going to binge all of the books of something. Usually I'm referencing like an actual series, and it means that I'm going to read all of the books back to back, often a fantasy series, or if I randomly have a romance series and I want to read them all back to back, I'm going to binge them. Or maybe I'm going to binge an entire author. I'm going to read her entire backlog, which comes to my next one. A backlog is just all of an author's work. Like sometimes an author will put out a book and then I'll really enjoy it. And then I'll be like, oh my God, I want to see what else this author has written. So I'll start to backlog her work. I'll go through all of the stuff that she's written in the past. There's also info dump, which is when an author gives you a lot of information right at the beginning of the book. Often this is referencing like fantasy books when they're trying to build up this fantastical world that they've come up with and they need to explain to you the ins and outs of how everything's going to work. Usually they'll info dump it at the beginning. Often people are not a fan of info dumping because it could feel very heavy and hard to follow, but sometimes it could be done really well and sometimes it's not done as well and it could feel very heavy on information. But that is what info dump means. Buddy reads or read-alongs is when two or more people are reading the same book at the same time so that they can discuss it as they go. It's kind of like a book club of sorts, you know? But people do this often when they both want to read the same book and they notice that the other person wants to read it, so they read it together so that they have somebody to chat about it with. Happens to be, I have never done one of these stuff and I will probably never do it because I happen to read books really fast, and when you read it with somebody else, you have to stay on the same page as them. Like you have to read it in the same like amount of time so that one person isn't more ahead of the other sort of thing. And the thing is that I'll usually pick up a book and I'll finish it within a couple of hours. Like I just don't sit on books for so long. So I personally never really do this, but I see people like say this word all the time. I like to think of the word reading slump as a reading funk. It's kind of when you're just feeling uninspired to read at the moment, or you have a string of books that are very underwhelming and you're just not picking up anything good at the moment for some reason. Like nothing is clicking with you and you're in a funk. Therefore, you're in a reading slump. And the last one that I was able to think of is a mood reader, which is exactly what I am. It just means that you pick up a book based off your actual mood and what you're currently down to read, versus another person might, let's say, make a set schedule for themselves, usually because maybe they'll have arcs that they have to get through before the publishing date, or maybe they set themselves a specific TBR and therefore they set that challenge for themselves that they very much want to read all of these books by a certain time or something like that. And then oppositely, a mood reader just goes with the flow. You know what I mean? So anyway, I'm a mood reader, and that is actually why I have a massive physical TBR, because I need to have a lot of options so that when I'm going to pick up a book, I have a lot to choose from. But anyway, that is everything that I have to share with you today. So if there is something that you had a question about that I didn't mention in this video, feel free to leave me a comment. I will try to answer it if I know the answer to it. And then also, in case you wanted to reference everything I just said, I'm going to make sure that all of this is in the description below. I probably shouldn't tell you that because then you weren't going to watch the video, but I said it at the end. So instead of having to rewatch this video, if you have a question about anything that I mentioned in this video, then it's all going to be down in the description. But anyway, if you enjoyed watching this video and you found it helpful, then please give it a thumbs up. If you're not currently subscribed to my channel, please hit that subscribe button. And anyway, thank you so much for watching, and until next time, enjoy reading.